Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to the third event, Women in Biotech, organized by Lithuanian Biotechnology Association. And today we have an extremely interesting topic about investments. And I'm very pleased to be in the company of three truly big experts in this field. My name is Giedre Kvedaraviciene, and I am the Vice Chairwoman of American Chamber of Commerce, and as well as that, I'm a very proud member of Lithuanian Biotechnology Association. And it will be my pleasure to have a discussion with three ladies, as I said already. It's Karen Griffith Gryga, which will be our key speaker from the United States today, as well as two prominent women from Lithuanian investment field. It's Viktorija Vaitkeviciene and Rita Sakus. So I very much look forward for truly interesting an hour and a half ahead on the topic, which I guess every one of us is very interested. So let me start today's event by saying good morning to Karen, and may I ask you to briefly introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Karen Griffith Gryga. Currently, I'm COO of a biotech company called WOMEN in the United States. We have a diagnostic hardware platform as well as diagnostic tests that are currently focused on the COVID-19 pandemic. My background is a mixture of operational and investment experience. I've been a venture capitalist for over 25 years, focused on early stage technology companies, primarily in healthcare, but also in broad enterprise software solutions. And I have originally a technology background.
So I can hear that your background is truly rich and diverse in experiences. And may I ask you, how did it come this way, and how did it lead you to where you are today?
Well, like anything else I find in life, it's a mixture of fortunate experiences combined with just determination and focus. So I originally got into the technology field really very early on in 8th grade. I was chosen for a program, and we had to do a project, and I chose to work with software programming very early on. So that was just a fortuitous decision. It was the very early days of the personal computers. So I went into the technology industry and did software development for a number of years, but always knew that I wanted advanced degrees. So I had put a plan in place to go back to grad school. And, I always liked the technology side of things, but also the business side of things. So I couldn't decide between the two. So I got both. I got a master's in business administration from Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as a master's in computer science. My intention was to go into the technology industry, but I actually got recruited into venture capital because the industry was really starting to specialize at that time. And then throughout my history with venture capital, I've helped found 2 different venture capital funds. I've always respected and believed that early stage investors are more powerful when they combine their investment experience with operational experience. So originally I was in venture capital for 13 years. And then I went off and started 2 companies because all the early stage technology VCs I most admired had started businesses. So I did that. It was tremendously scary to kind of leave a business where you're a leader and you well understand it to start up business. But for me, it was the right decision. I strongly believe that early stage investors should have operational experience. One company was successful, one company failed. That was a hard experience to go through, but a very valuable one. I came back into venture capital for a number of years. And then recently in June, decided to join one of my portfolio companies as COO because the vision for the company is tremendous. And I was getting that operational itch again.
So if anyone would ask you what you wish you knew before joining this career, and as you mentioned, making this failure with one of the companies, but maybe there were some also other discoveries.
Oh, there are so many discoveries. I'd say, the two primary discoveries that I wish I knew for the beginning are, well, let me modify that, three primary discoveries. One, it is all about your network, 100% all about your network. You as an individual can't possibly know everything and everyone. So you need to, be gathering people around you that have expertise that not only can help you, but you can help them. Outside of leaving school, I've never conducted a job search. My job changes have always been through my network. And then whenever I'm in a position and looking to be successful in that position, I'm always reaching out to my network, either for introductions to other people or access to expertise. So it sounds cliche, but it is all about the network, and be very conscious about building the network from the beginning. The second thing is really to learn how to be market customer driven. Every successful entrepreneur I've seen, every successful business person I've seen really understands how to listen to the market, how to understand what the market needs, knows how to push on questions. I mean, we call it the 5 levels of why. You go, why this, why that, why. You really dig in to try to understand the whys, and really focus on being that market customer driven entity that really understands things deeply. And then the third thing is, I think it's important for any individual who's managing their career to really develop an expertise. And that expertise can be vertical, a particular area of science or technology, or it can be horizontal, meaning kind of the best sales expert or marketing expert. But it's really important in the foundational time period of your career to make that choice and really build upon that throughout your career.
Thanks. Adding on what you already mentioned, do you see any specific challenges for women in technology-driven industries?
Well, unfortunately, there's challenges for women in business, period. I think it's gotten tremendously better over the years. It's kind of interesting. Obviously, I know the United States situation more than, internationally, but, it was not until the 70s, really, that women could technically own their own business. And why I say that is because until the Credit Act, I believe it was 76, a woman had to get either their husband or father to co-sign a business line of credit for them. So if you kind of think about business and how you grow a business, that really was a hindrance for women. So, throughout time, there's been a lot of structural impediments to women in business. Those are largely removed. I think the biggest challenge still, and this comes from women and men, is the unconscious bias that people still bring into business. And in general, I mean, again, we've made tremendous progress, and there is fortunately tremendously successful role models out there who have not only successes but business expertise. But there still is a very strong environment of unconscious bias where women have to prove themselves more, where we have to be more kind of insistent as a voice to get our point across, where we have to have more validating data points in order to get people to take us seriously.
And may I ask, because you mentioned whys, right? It's always important to ask. So why do you think it is important to empower women and make sure that we have more equality in leadership positions in business?
Well, women are extremely effective in business. I mean, studies have shown when you have a diverse team that is inclusive of women, the businesses are more successful with less capital deployed. So we're effective business leaders. So not only is it the right thing to do, I mean, women, make up 50% of the workforce, but it also makes economic sense because women, like men, can be quite effective in business. And the studies have shown this time and time again.
And what about women participation in investment activities? Do you see any specific trends or anything that you would like to comment on that?
There are more women participating in the investment area. I think where women are most successful is where there's really pockets of champions. And so today we have more investment capital focused on women than ever before. We have more investment funds and vehicles that have women in positions of leadership and decision making. So there has been tremendous progress, but more work is needed to just get more women in the field and to keep them in the field.
And do you see any differences, let's say, between the United States, Asia, or Europe in those processes of women empowerment, both in the field of driving technology-empowered startups, as well as investing in such kind of startups?
Well, I see pockets of hope throughout the world. Europe in general, the venture capital industry is a little less mature than in the United States. And certainly in Asia, there's tremendous amount of capital. There's very large funds that have a very broad risk profile, meaning, here in the US, the larger funds tend to focus on later stage companies and the smaller funds tend to focus on earlier stage companies. But certainly we've seen in Asia tremendously effective, very large funds supporting the early stage. So, I don't know percentages, but certainly I've met, European female investors and, Asian female investors and so forth. I think that the challenges are pretty much the same across the world. But, you know, fortunately, we have foundational elements throughout the world. So there are women in leadership positions, women in power positions in every part of the world, and it just needs to continue.
But yet you still made a comment about Europe being a little less, let's say, developed. What exactly did you mean by that?
I think the industry as a whole, venture capital, as you know, early stage technology support, the industry as a whole started a little bit later in Europe than it did in the United States. And so, you know, I think that there's perhaps a little less delineation there in terms of funds and focus than there is in the U.S. in terms of, you know, we have buyouts, we have mid-market, we have emerging growth venture capital, we have, you know, very early stage venture capital. I mean, certainly there's firms in each of those, but it's just, in my understanding of the history of it, that was just started a little bit later than the United States. And, you know, traditionally has had maybe a little bit less risk profile than the United States has, but I certainly don't think that's the case anymore. I just think it's in terms of the number of funds, the number of active independent funds, you know, not being government supported, is a little less developed than it is in the United States.
Right, thank you. Another question that I have for you is, I would like you to make comments what made Dream It Athena program, which, as far as I understand, was dedicated for empowering women and specifically focusing on startups which are led by women. So could you tell us the success story of that program?
Well, the idea of Dream It Athena was to increase the probability of a female entrepreneur raising venture capital. The amount of venture capital dollars going to female entrepreneurs is significantly less than going to male entrepreneurs, significantly. So in putting the Dream It Athena program together, I tried to identify both structural barriers for that, as well as perhaps individual psychological barriers as to why that's the case. So the program focused on 4 pillars, and 2 of those are structural and 2 were kind of on what I'd say are women-specific psychologies. And, you know, I did this based upon studies that studied female venture capital. So the 2 structural pillars were, one, putting together role models for female entrepreneurs. And that's not just female CEOs, but female CTOs, CMOs, marketing experts, sales experts, HR experts, basically role models in every functional area of business so that they have other women to go to. Because still today, in the media, in the press, generally when you see successful entrepreneurs, operators highlighted, it's a higher probability of being a male than a female. So as I kind of said earlier in my comments, it's all about the network. And so I wanted to empower my female entrepreneurs to have a network of experts and resources to go to. And so that was number 1. Number 2 was just straight access to capital. So today there's a lot more online databases of sources of capital And certainly, within the past 5 years, there's been tremendous more capital going to female-focused funds, female-led funds. But at the time, we put together a database of traditional venture funds, meaning male-dominated, male-led venture funds that had invested in a female entrepreneur. The idea being that if they had done it at least once, they're probably prone to do it again. That perhaps the level of unconscious bias in that particular firm was less. So this database was broken out by industry, by stage, but specifically focused on venture funds that had invested in female entrepreneurs previously. The two psychological, pillars that I focused on were what I called the 60% rule and women's inherent capacity to multitask. So the 60% rule was focused on a well-known HP study that focused on females versus males. And what they found is when they put out a job opportunity that had 10 target characteristics, men applied when they had 6, women applied when they had all 10. We tend to do 100%, 110%, 120% before we go for something. So the idea of the 60% rule is the fact that, maybe those men who applied for the positions weren't ready for the positions, but they were now on people's radars. And so there was a stronger propensity to groom these people for promotions, to bring them special projects. So the idea is when you are 60% to your goal, whatever that goal is, if it's fundraising, if it's go to market, if it's, hiring a certain talent, you start putting it out there in the market. You start raising your profile, you start getting involved, and you start going for it. So the idea is to try to pull back from women's propensity to be over-prepared for an opportunity. So the framework is whenever you're thinking about something, think about the 60% point and start being visible, being active. The other thing was, as women, we tend to be tremendous multitaskers. And just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. So it was explicit exercises about kind of the highest priority and making sure that as an entrepreneur, you are putting your focus on the highest priority activities and not spending your time doing activities which you could do, but you probably shouldn't be doing. So much more focus on bringing resources in to help you do activities because, I think often we as women try to do it all, and that doesn't necessarily help you in business.
That's true. Everything you said, I guess every one of us can relate more or less, all the multitasking and perfections, ambitions for that. So while it is kind of clear while you read it or you hear someone saying it, it's still also very much true that once you get back into your daily routine, it seems like something out of your current character. What, in your opinion, if you notice any are the most important, let's say, personal character features which help women not only to understand that those qualities are needed, but also train them in themselves?
Let's say, well, I mean, as an early stage entrepreneur, I think the first thing anyone has to do is be passionate about what they're doing and really believe in it. But that is true for any entrepreneur, just not just female entrepreneurs. That it's really, really hard to start a business from scratch and build something. In the healthcare field and in the biotech field, in particular, right? Because it can take years before you develop your first product or solution, and take years to get your first customer. So being passionate about what you're doing, I find, is a critical requirement, because being an early stage entrepreneur is really, really challenging. Having tremendous, confidence in yourself and what you're doing is really important. I find that there's a fine line between confidence and being open to the market and the market feedback. It's very, very few entrepreneurs that's successful telling the market what they need. I mean, everybody thinks about Apple and Steve Jobs and so forth, and obviously he was a visionary and was tremendously strong about kind of revolutionary product and people adopting that. But most companies, most startups, it's an evolutionary solution. So they're between having very strong confidence and faith in yourself, but listening to the market and getting feedback from the market, are two kind of balancing things that you need to constantly be rebalancing and thinking about. And as it ties to the market itself, having strong empathy for the target market and the customer is critical. I think in general, as women, we have an advantage in that factor. And finally, developing strong networks and really, the critical part about a network is the give and take of it, right? You can't just take from a network. You also have to give to the network, so that there's, people are there when you need them. But, leveraging that network to open doors and get access to solutions, and just, knowing smartly where you have the expertise and where you don't, and seeking, support around you in areas where you realistically don't have the expertise or the experience. And then just in general, this is entrepreneurs in general, just be willing to go through walls to get it done.
Okay, so I'll ask, I guess, more or less same thing, but from the other angle. What are the most common mistakes that you observe when women or any entrepreneur are trying to establish the startup, and especially when they try to go out to the market for funding?
Well, going to the market for funding, it's really about having a cohesive story and all the pieces behind it together. So fundraising, like anything else, that, it's a form of sales, right? So fundraising is a numbers game. So, the first step any entrepreneur needs to do is, to have a story, to be able to tell your story in a cohesive manner that not answers all the questions, but gives people enough that they want to learn more, right? So there's kind of the famous, you have 2 minutes to capture someone's attention, elevator pitch. But in a lot of times I've met entrepreneurs who have, gone on this long explanation about their business. And, I've worked with hundreds of companies. I've, been in venture capital. God, it's more than 25 years. And I just look at them and I say, I have no idea what your business is or what you do, right? So having that clear, cohesive story is important. And then having all the pieces in place. What's the support behind your target market? What's the support behind your positioning? What's your support behind your product market fit? The competitive landscape, your business model, your projections. So just having all the core elements in place in a thoughtful manner. One thing I say to entrepreneurs all the time is, serve your investment thesis to the investor on a silver platter, right? They may not agree with you, but at least you have your story and all the pieces in place that mean you've done your homework, that you've thought through what it means from the investor's perspective to invest in this company. But at the end of the day, fundraising is a numbers game. When I raised my first venture fund, I probably talked, and it was largely raised from high net worth individuals. I probably talked to 600, 700 potential investors to get, 68 investors. So too many times, people go into fundraising and, someone expresses interest. And so they stop the process, focus on that one entity because they expressed interest and they thought, oh, there's the advantages and disadvantages of being an entrepreneur, in that most entrepreneurs tend to be perpetual optimists. And in fundraising, you kind of have to be the opposite. You have to assume that everyone's going to say no, right? So you just have to build up your pipeline to the point where you really have probability on your side of getting the money raised. Now, there's lucky entrepreneurs that go out there and talk to 10 investors and get their investment, and everything's good, but that's unusual. So fundraising, like anything else, is a process. I find it useful to set weekly goals for yourself. So when I was fundraising my fund, I set a goal of 15 meetings a week, which is really actually very difficult to achieve. If you think about, that's essentially 3 meetings a day, and if you're going to different locations and so forth. But, set goals for yourself, set metrics, and expect that it's going to take time and lots of conversations to achieve your fundraising goals.
How much in all of that would you put a wave of dependence on the context? What I mean is national economies and development of specific industries. If, for example, talking about Lithuania, we are a small economy with potentially high growth rates for the industry, but it's still unknown in the global markets. So is it already a factor which is closing doors for the startups to search for investments outside of the country? Or do you see some kind of, tricks or mechanisms how to overcome this issue of national economies maybe not being so well established on a global level?
Well, the macroeconomics always impacts, especially, the early stage startup world. In many, many cases, the initial support for an early stage startup is local, whether that's high net worth investors, angel investors, whether that's family and friends money, whether that is often a government fund where it's really focused on economic development. It's really important to have those early stage pools of capital that tend to be more localized, available to the early stage companies. And then it's really, I think the onus is on the entrepreneurs to get as many data proof points that they can with that capital to then broaden the potential pools of capital that they can go after. Here in the VC world at this point, there's much less geographic boundaries than there used to be. Certainly, there are funds that have geographies, defined geographies as part of their investment thesis. But in general, if you have a company going after a very large market opportunity that has intellectual property and has some proof points behind that, that you'll be able to attract capital from elsewhere. But it's usually getting those initial validation points that the local money, the local support is typically most important for.
For you as, let's say, a representative of investors from the US, does the participation of industry-specific association in this process of gathering the structure as well as some structured approach to funding, does it give you greater confidence to look at this market, to look at the startups, and maybe give them a chance to pitch you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what's important with the industry associations is forming that ecosystem of support, between companies, between larger enterprises and smaller enterprises to really kind of pool that expertise and resources. And then, it's a very common process in early stage companies to figure out, what are approaches that enable you to de-risk your opportunity through creative means. And so one of the things that early stage companies often do is form an advisory board of industry experts. The thinking being, if these experts are spending their time with this company and sharing their time and expertise, that must mean that there's something there, right? So it's a form of validation, it's a form of de-risking. And so, insofar as the industry associations are really kind of encouraging that engagement and that mentoring and, really that connection between companies and, there's expertise there that's specific to the opportunity. It can really, really help validate and de-risk these early stage companies.
Right, thank you very much. Now let's turn to one of the hot topics or most popular topics of these days, COVID-19. In your opinion, what does it mean for the development of these technological startups, especially in healthcare industry, and what kind of new opportunities or accelerated opportunities for development you see or not see in the context of COVID?
Well, there's a couple of different contexts in the context of COVID. Certainly, the pandemic has broken norms that have been in development for decades. So, for instance, we invested at DreamIt in our first telehealth company, I want to say 2009. So now we're in 2020, and the pandemic has obviously busted open the doors on telehealth. So there's certain trends within healthcare that the pandemic has tremendously accelerated, whether that's telehealth, whether that's remote monitoring of patients, and certainly that involves technology and diagnostics, chronic condition care, has been broken out. And there's more creative approaches to problems that are being considered these days. For instance, I would say the whole kind of peer-to-peer mentoring model with human health has really gotten tremendous traction. So certainly there are pockets of opportunities. Sorry, the sun's coming up. I should close the shade. Hold on. Sorry, I think that helps. Anyway, boy, I don't know.
We're not getting much of it now in Lithuania,
There.
so it's
Okay,
nice to
good.
see it at least on the screen.
Sorry about that. So certainly there's pockets of opportunity, and then we're in the diagnostics field at BioMeme, so the whole concept of point of care diagnostics and point of care, testing has just been revolutionized with the pandemic. So certainly in healthcare, the pandemic has driven areas of tremendous growth. In other areas of healthcare, because there's been so many resources devoted to the pandemic, unfortunately, there's resource constraints, the buying cycles are longer. Certainly other areas of healthcare that don't support kind of these new models of managing patients in different remote virtual ways. They've just been, held up because a lot of the resources are devoted to the pandemic. There is kind of the good and the bad of times like this where there's macroeconomic stressors. If you look back in kind of the United States in a time period where we call affectionately, the nuclear winter, right, where we had major macroeconomic problems in the 2008-2009 time period, there was a tremendous number of successful startups that were founded during that time period. And what can be nice during a time of macroeconomic stressors is that as a startup, especially if you can be extremely capital efficient, it can give you the time to lay down all the foundational elements to a solution in a very kind of methodical way during times like this, because there aren't really competitive pressures in areas of less focus. And so times like this can be a time for early stage companies to really figure out their target customer, figure out their product market fit in a very methodical, logical way. But they do have to be extremely capital efficient because, at the end of the day, it's a matter of timing. And, one of the biggest sources of failure for companies is mismatched timing of when they develop a solution and the market readiness for that solution. So that's why the capital efficiency really comes into play, because you have to manage your product market fit to the timing, whether that timing is driven by macroeconomic conditions or customer adoption conditions or whatnot. So that was a two-part answer.
Absolutely. So, based on everything that we discussed today, if if we have, or I am, let's say I am a brilliant scientist and I have a great idea, probably I have limited understanding of how to really understand the market and all these timing things. What would be your advice for, let's say, the first 3 steps that I should make sure that I take care of to develop my brilliant idea into something that starts creating value?
Well, I'd say initially, as a scientist with a great idea, you want some form of data validating that idea, even if it's, early models or some sort of data that validates your idea. Because, often as a scientist who doesn't understand the business aspect of developing your solution, you can always get business experts engaged in your idea to help you, but business people look for data. They look for support. So, how does that happen? That it's actually 2 pathways that happens. So if you have a scientist that has historically been successful in an area and is seen as an expert in an area, and they have a new idea, well, due to their expertise in a particular area, they already are kind of validated by their previous successes or previous experience. Or if you have a scientist that's earlier in their career, maybe not yet seen as an expert or a leader in their field, then that's where you really need some data behind, supporting your idea. So, I'd say one, get some validation, whether that's initial early data or just kind of gathering your background and your resources. 2, network with business expertise, business experts in your field that you're targeting, and really talk about what are the solutions the market needs, and what are the considerations for go to market that need to be understood, and customer adoption that need to be understood. So for instance, with a different entity a long time ago, we invested in a diagnostic that at the time was the best MRSA diagnostic in the world, and they had the data to support it, and it was an incredible diagnostic. However, they didn't understand the buying patterns of the hospitals at the time. They wanted to buy in panels. They didn't just want one perfect point solution. They were looking for panels of tests. So they didn't really care that was the best MRSA test, because that company didn't also have all the other tests that they wanted at the same time. And so that scientist, behind that test, they could have partnered with other companies and come to market with a full solution. So I'd say, network with business experts that know that industry. And if you have something that is really an opportunity to do something for the market, for the target customer, business people will get interested because they see the potential of the idea. The third thing is, be willing to listen, right? You might have all the expertise in the world on the science, but at the end of the day, you need the science coupled with the business to bring a successful solution to market. And so there's, often people that are experts in their field that maybe don't have the appreciation for the other types of expertise that they need to bring a solution to market. So listen and really hear what are the steps that you need to do to take to be successful, not just from the science perspective, but also from the business perspective.
True, very much supports what you say, and that's why I'm also very happy that Lithuanian Biotechnology Association is trying to be this platform for scientists to bridge those gaps of understanding and bring business and science together. And today's discussion, I believe, is of critical importance, at least from my part, because finances is something that either drives the correct ingredients collected together into, a company development, or lack of it can kill brilliant ideas even when all other resources are available here. So thank you very much for sharing your experience and ideas today, and I very much hope that you can still stay on. For all of those who are listening to our conversation, I would like to remind that you can put questions, and I will see them on the screen, and definitely put forward for our today's speakers. And I hope, Karen, that you can still stay with us, and that I could turn now to our two other panelists, that's Viktorija and Rita. And if I could please ask you to briefly introduce yourself. I know that you have also some joint projects. And then maybe we can discuss a little bit more specific details of what challenges and opportunities we have here in Lithuania and in the Baltics for the biotech. So shall Rita start?
Sure. So I'm very pleased to be here. Karen, I absolutely loved listening to you today, and I guess in the morning I was going to say for you. It was certainly insightful. And it really echoes a lot of my experiences and certainly what I've been doing. But most recently, I am one of the co-founders of an organization in Lithuania called the Lithuanian Business Angel Network. And what we do is we're part of an association of people who are business angels who get together once a month, and we see somewhere between 5 and 7 pitches of early stage companies to potentially invest in. So I would like to say that we have a lot of women in our organization, but unfortunately that's not the case. So I'm always promoting the organization to try to attract more women, because I believe diversity is key. And I think one of the main points that Karen drove also was that many studies have been done where when women are part of a business, an association, an organization, the results are even better and the experiences are even richer from that. So Litban, LITBAN.LT for anyone out there who's interested.
Thank you, Rita. And Viktorija?
I can add that I'm also a board member in Litban, and we met there with Rita. Yes. And also I'm manager of Co-Invest Capital Fund, which invests alongside business angels in Lithuania. So we are trying to boost this business angels community. And as Rita mentioned, we can't be proud of the number of women in the venture capital deals or in our network. So I just calculated in my mind, and it's like 10% of all the network. I think we have members in the Litban. Also, we already have invested with 70 business angels into 17 deals, and there's also only 10% of women between all these investors.
All right, so the numbers are not really impressive in terms of diversity in Lithuania. Karen, do you have similar statistics back in USA, or is it better?
It's a little bit better, but it's not, not awesome. So.
All right. Okay. So something still to keep sharing ideas and working on, right?
I think one of the biggest challenges is actually the confidence gap. I think women still have a feeling of, what am I going to bring to the table, and not having the 100% or the 110%, as Karen had mentioned. We really have to drive that 60% rule into other women, and help them realize that you've got something to bring to the table, and diversity is key for even venture deals. The more different ways you can parse a company, or understand what the future holds of the company potentially, the better off you are from the starting point. And these are really tough deals to be doing, because it's really difficult to understand markets that haven't even been formed yet, really.
And we need to understand that our clients, are we talking about the companies in which we invest, or are we talking about the final clients? So we need to understand that it's also diversified. So we need to understand their needs from the market. So it's hard if we have only gender investors from our side. So
I'd like to be slightly provocative on this, because I have heard a few times in biotech conferences women saying that quite often it is other women who oppose, or not support, or in worst case scenarios even try to stop ideas being promoted by other women. Is it really the case that we are not as supportive for each other, women, or is it just an impression of separate, not successful stories, would you say?
Yeah, I think earlier on it might have been the case, because the positions or the slots that women could fit in were so limited. So we all felt like we had to fight for this, one position. And so, we were put into a position, I think, earlier where we were kind of competing for that very limited one slot that was available. Let's put a woman on our board, and let's put a woman on our board, and make ourselves more diverse, right? I mean, I don't think that seems to be the case right now. And I would say that, as we get more and more mature in all of our markets, I think, and across the board, whether it's investing, or whether it's forming companies, or whether it's joining companies, or even in schools, I think it's just getting better and better and better, and I don't think that we feel that it's that these positions are limited resources that we have to necessarily fight each other for. We can cooperate now.
And from my experience, previously I was selecting teams for managing the venture capital funds. And before the ESG rules, we didn't have requirements that a part of the team should be women. But we always looked at it, and it was a plus for us, an advantage if the team was constructed and diversified. So before it was cool. So I can't say from my experience that it's true. So we always trying to support women in the companies, in the VC, and because you need to have different opinions, different genders in every field, not only in the investment field. So.
True, very much. Karen, what about the States?
Well, unfortunately, there is a component of female bias. What the other panelists have said is definitely true, but there's been studies of resumes, and when they have a male name versus a female name, the perception is that the male is more accomplished and more of an expert. And unfortunately, that has come from both male and female reviewers of the information. So unfortunately, at least here in the US, there's a bias built into our society that unfortunately I think is going to continue to take time to eradicate. So if I look at our generations that are high school age and college age, I think there's much less unconscious bias in that generation than there has been in others. But unfortunately, I think the component of women not helping women, I think at a conscious level, there's much more of a conscious effort for women to help women in many sectors. But unfortunately, this underlying unconscious bias still exists. That's why you hear about, orchestras going to blinded auditions and all kinds of different approaches. Fortunately, our understanding of unconscious bias is increasing and our awareness of it is increasing, but it still exists not only in men, but in women as well, unfortunately. And progress there is just going to have to continue.
And in terms of, let's say, technology, at least in Lithuania, we don't have this problem because we have a lot of women in science. But in other countries, it's the gender equality is improving. That meaning that number of women is increasing studying, if you can say so, hard sciences like biotechnologies or physics or say mathematics. Does this tendency somehow correlates with changes in business environment and business leadership? Shall I clarify my question, I guess?
Are you asking?
What I'm trying to say, we're talking about women empowerment in specifically biotech, right, today. So one trend is happening in business of women taking more proactively claiming those positions in leadership. And the other side is science, where we see increase of women participating in science, but yet we still don't see leaders in science being dominated or at least equally balanced as men. For example, taking your advices for data gathering, and either you have proved success stories before or you have to rely on hard data proving that. Still, in most cases, it's men who go forward with this. So what I'm trying to ask, I guess, is that we have this tendency, maybe being a little bit late, but getting gender equality on scientific side and how to connect those women in leadership positions with women in science to have a faster progress for those startups driven by technologies.
Yeah, I think there's more emphasis on STEM and women that needs to happen. I think it really, at the end of the day, at least the studies I have seen have shown that, in many cases, the women drop out of STEM starting in middle school, high school, into college. And I think a lot of it is the confidence factor. And where girls and young ladies can have role models and exposure, whether that's science camps or meetings with successful female scientists. I think that's really what's needed to boost the confidence, because from a pure intellectual basis and capability basis, I mean, it's there. it's really that the confidence and the role models need to be there to showcase that, yes, you can do this, and yes, there are people doing it. I think, I'm in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania region. We have a tremendous number of female biotech leaders that have successfully grown and exited companies, and many of them have gotten involved in a local organization that focuses on girls in STEM. And I think the earlier that you can instill confidence in the girls, the more we'll have that will be entering the field.
And what a great time to be talking about this too now, as the two Nobel Prize winners are female biochemists, right? I mean, I think it's a great time because I think I was reading on the weekend, since 1895, there were 60 women that won the Nobel Prize. So we got a bunch of them this year as women, I think, and more to the point, to this industry, it's a huge booster, I think, also. I mean, those role models, there's a lack of role models, and I think role models provide the confidence that, if she can do it, so can I. And I think, that's absolutely one of the key ingredients. I agree.
Okay, so talking about those role models and women's confidence, especially scientists' confidence, how do you think the business side and investors' side could help them to gather it inside of them? Because we know that within the scientific community, right, they have their own society, which is separate from business society, if I could put it that way. So how business and investors could reach out, give those hands to make sure that women in science gain that confidence, maybe to take this extra step, to step out of a comfort zone and go for their dreams.
I mean, in venture capital, I think there are a lot of funds that are now specifically focused on women in the States, and you can do that because you're such a large market. Here in Lithuania, I think it would be a little, it wouldn't be such a great idea from a business perspective to do such a thing because, the numbers are just so different. But I think that, you certainly need to find champions, and you need to find people who are going to, help you along the way and provide, those kind of 3 key ingredients that you need to get to the next step. And I think that there are those associations available. Certainly here in Lithuania, we have, women's business associations. We also have champions, let's say, in the community, and you find through your network the champions that are going to help you get to that whatever next stage it is.
Yeah, but I think that we need to be more public. Because as you mentioned, we are in small communities, and for example, we are talking about our experience. We are showing examples of such women, such achievements, but we are talking in small groups of our society. So we need to be more visible, to talk through, national TV shows. We need to be more public in every stages, and we shouldn't talk only in the associations, in some events, because it's really necessary to show that we have a lot of stereotypes everywhere in the society. So we need to say that no, women shouldn't be a housewife. It can create and achieve a lot. But we need to share it.
Or I would say vice versa. If a woman is successful in business and she's smart, she also can be a happy, family person.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
not necessarily a trade-off between that. I'm very happy because we have a first question from our listeners. Dear Karen, thank you for a lovely speech. Could you please tell us about your best mentors?
My best mentors.
Yes.
Well, my initial best mentor, was the lead of this program that I did in 8th grade, where, he really encouraged me to look into software programming because he knew that I needed, that I was very mathematically oriented and strong, and so he encouraged me to pursue this new thing, and which I did. And then there was no question for me about going to college. I got a bachelor's in computer science, and then a master's in computer science, when really not a lot of women did. So he instilled the confidence in me early to pursue a field where there really weren't that many women. And then I think about my first boss. At my first job, I went into software programming for the defense industry initially out of college, and I'm still close friends with this woman, Cynthia Williams, and she pushed me. I got in there early and showed early talent, and within 2 years of working, I was running a multi-million-dollar software development project, not because I thought I could do it, but because she was like, you can do this. I will be here to support you. You need to apply for this, and I'm here for you. So, the worst thing that can happen is no, and you move on. So she made a very conscious investment in me and pushed me hard. And honestly, my best mentors now are this tremendous portfolio of entrepreneurs that I have around me, where they have different experiences and different expertise. And kind of at DreamEd, one of my biggest things that I was able to do was to connect my entrepreneurs with each other. And now, now that I'm here at BioMeme, I'm leveraging a bunch of them because, no matter your age or experience level, if you have an expertise in a specific area and are willing to share that with others, that's highly valuable. So I would say, certainly I have peers now. When I was thinking about transitioning to the COO role with BioMeme, I reached out to my sister, who's been an executive. I reached out to a peer from Wharton, who's the CEO of a company. I've reached out to several other people on my network just to kind of get their advice and how to think about prioritization. So, my mentor network is more experienced, similarly experienced, and less experienced, but it's really based upon people's expertise and experiences in life.
Very interesting to hear about your mentors and people who made greatest impact, at least in your opinion, to make you to be where you are today. Viktorija, Rita?
I think that first of all, of course, my mother, but they are always supportive to their child. But I also can mention my previous boss, and she was also woman, and that's why I'm here today, because 7 years ago she pushed me into this field, and she was quite strict, but also she was supportive, and there was no borders to her, because she was also defending all of us, and she showed how all employees should be treated. So, and I'm trying to continue this, and I think that in every field you need to be supportive. Of course, you need to be strict in your field in some kind of situations, but you need to always listen to your employee, to companies in which you invest, and then you can find the best solution, I think.
I was trying to think back, and I don't think I've actually had a female boss ever. My situation is that any men that I worked for and worked with were always super supportive and would just, really honestly urge me to drive forward, because in the beginning of my career, I certainly didn't have the confidence or the foresight maybe of where it was I was going to go. And I think these opportunities opened because I had a champion behind me, or someone who would challenge me to take something on where I certainly didn't feel like I had 100%, but they thought that okay, we push her hard enough, she'll be able to do it and she'll get there, and they were fantastic champions. Having said that, I also, in 2014, so 6 years ago, I completed a fascinating program at Harvard School of Business, which was meant for women leaders, and I loved the whole concept of kind of fantastic lecturers coming in and talking to women across all industries from all around the world on picking up their careers post having families, and maybe changing their careers midway through life, or coming back into. And I mean, it's a challenge that a lot of men don't necessarily have to go through. They don't take the time, as much time off for having kids or having families. But it's great that we're starting to recognize this, and we're starting to develop support groups and different ways of how women can integrate back into societies. So, I mean, and into the workforce certainly as well. So I think it's really exciting because we're presented with a lot more opportunities despite the challenges.
And I can add that now, for example, in my field, in BC sector, I'm surrounded by men, but they are always supporting you. They have a lot of advices because we are just beginners in it. So I can't say that they are different from the women with whom we have connections in that field. So they are quite supportive also, and it helps a lot.
I was listening to all of you, and just like Rita, I mean, all my mentors were men, in fact, and I cannot say that all of them were supportive, because some of them, they did try to pass their experience and teach. The others were challenging in not a very nice way, but then again, I guess it depends on the character, right? Because if someone challenges you, sometimes not even very fairly, it also becomes a motivation to prove that they're wrong. And it seems that the topic of mentoring is really important for our listeners. There is another question saying, thank you for organizing such a valuable event. I have a question for Karen. Are you a mentor? If yes, what are you learning from this? And do you meet potential individuals who might motivate even you?
So absolutely. Yes, I have been a mentor over the years. I continue to be a mentor. Like anything in life, it ebbs and flows with the other demands. So right now with BioMEM, because we have a COVID diagnostic, we've tripled our growth since I joined in June. So I am working about 80, 90 hours a week right now, and it's just circumstance specific. But yes, I've always mentored people, and that's kind of in two formats. I spot mentor people on specific goals or desires, and then I've had more kind of longer term mentors. And what I ask from my mentees is just, you know, keep the time efficient, have specific goals for the conversations, and, you know, do your homework and do your follow-up. And, you know, so sometimes when people are busy, it's not on a set schedule, and sometimes it is on a set schedule. You know, and what have I learned from my mentees? I mean, you know, the world, in my opinion, is about idea sharing and opinions and experience. So I'm constantly learning because, you know, people have their own areas of expertise. And so through these conversations, I'm enriched about either different market opportunities or different thought patterns for different generations or whatnot. So it's just, you know, adding to my understanding of different areas.
Absolutely. Age, I guess, and generation is one of the topics, right, that you can learn most when mentoring. Rita, Viktorija, what are your experience? I'm pretty sure that mentoring is also part of your life.
Well, I've certainly had to manage women in my jobs and in my career. I'm not sure whether I've actually technically mentored, but I've, you know, participated in associations and so I don't know if I've actually technically been a mentor, but I've been a manager. So and I think part of being a manager is being a mentor. So I've certainly challenged the women that were working in my organization, and I've always left an organization trying to ensure that, you know, their futures are higher, achieving something higher than what they were before. So I think from that perspective.
Even for me, she is a mentor.
All right.
So-
Okay. So we have a
Yeah, but it's as Rita mentioned, it's not technically
Of
a
course.
mentoring, but when you can see great examples, I think that you can learn from them. So it's important to take it from
Well,
others.
from my experience, mentoring is definitely rewarding I guess, in two ways. One is you really want to give your knowledge and experience to those young, passionate eyes. And another thing is, yes, there are differences between generations, and it's really interesting to hear how they're thinking, how they're seeing business challenges or opportunities. So it's a dual way for everyone. And I saw there was a question which somehow disappeared, but it was about work and life balance. So how do you all, you know, manage being so active, so smart, good looking, and is there any space left for having your private life and enjoying it? Karen?
Yeah, well, so I have two children, and they are now 22 and just graduated from college and starting their career, and 19 college freshmen. And so I've been very lucky historically in that my jobs have had a lot of flexibility associated with them. And so the way I've approached work-life balance is what I call more integration. In the sense that, you know, my daughter played lacrosse for 12 years. So if I needed to leave work to go see her game, then I would be working afterwards. So I never really set boundaries in terms of working time, in terms of hours of day. It was more like my life was integrated and I did what I needed to do. And if that involved me then working late or, you know, working on the weekends, it didn't really bother me because I was achieving my goals in my personal life and achieving my goals in my professional life. And it just was achieved through that integration, not really separation.
Victoria?
And you need to have balance. If, for example, you need to walk through the night and you can for a week or something, but then you need to take time for yourself to go to spa, to take good sleep, just watch TV or something, and you need to balance everything, and you shouldn't think that you need to do everything on time, because it's impossible, and you need to find out how to do not all the work but part of it, and then postpone something till the next day, etc.
And nothing will collapse? And nothing will collapse?
No, of course you need to prioritize your job. So
I'm
and then
joking,
you
it's
can-
always that feeling, you know,
Yeah,
that
so-
if you don't do something,
But you need to understand
collapses.
that you can't, you can't solve all the problems, and you can't work all the time. So you need.
Yeah, I think prioritization is key, and for a lot of very driven people, it's difficult to prioritize, doing something for fun, actually, or doing something, that makes you rest or relax. And certainly, the irony of this pandemic and working from home, I've probably never worked as hard as I have. It was, constant, and what else was there to do? And you were online, and you were participating in conferences, and you were taking phone calls, and Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. And I mean, there's actually a term for Zoom burnout now. So yeah, I mean, it's, I think this pandemic has highlighted how important it is to take time for yourself and to create that balance no matter what.
Excellent. Well, it's sadly that our time is running out, because otherwise I guess there are still so many topics that we did not cover. But thank you very much for sharing your insights and participating. It's a nice feeling inside for me that even participating in serious businesses and doing serious things, we still somehow move the conversation towards the soft parts of personality standing first, I guess, and this confidence issue, and all the rest can be achieved as long as it's really something that you pursue and have passion for. So thank you, Karen, very much for joining us today, and I very much hope to see you in Lithuania. We have loads of things to show you, and I'm sure that you would find some interesting things to discuss with Rita and Viktorija live, and also find some interesting ideas and businesses here in Lithuania. So you are very, very welcome, as long as this COVID is not keeping us locked for forever. And thank you for everyone who was listening to us today. And please don't forget that there is the final event. It's dedicated for startups. And I hope that after today's conversation, you will be inspired definitely not to miss the last one, which will be next week. Thank you very much, and see you. Moteris, kas labai.
Žiūrėkit, kaip